Right now, it feels like we're living through an AI gold rush, doesn't it? I mean, every single week there's a new model, a new breakthrough, a new promise that the world is about to change forever. But here's the thing, we've been here before. This incredible excitement, it has a flip side, a long, cold AI winter. So today, we're going to dig into the history of these cycles to figure out, where we might be heading next.
All right, to really get this, we've got to go back. Way back. It's 1965, and Herbert Simon, a Nobel Prize winner and a total pioneer in AI, makes this just mind-blowing prediction. And look, this wasn't some off-the-cuff remark. This was the leading voice in the field, telling everyone that a complete revolution was just 2 decades away.
So, did it happen? I mean, fast forward 20 years to 1985, were machines doing any work a man could do? Not even close. Not even a little bit. That huge grand vision, it just didn't happen. And it's this massive gap, right? The gap between the promise and the reality, that's the heart of our story today.
So to figure out what went wrong, we need to talk about a concept that kind of haunts the whole field of AI, the AI winter.
So what is it, really? Well, at its core, an AI winter is what happens after the hype dies down. It's that chilling effect that sets in when all those grand promises don't come true. Investors get cold feet, the public loses interest, and the funding just evaporates. It's not like all progress stops dead, but that incredible momentum, it's gone.
And you know what's so fascinating is that this isn't random. It's actually a pretty predictable pattern. There's this thing called the Gartner Hype Cycle that basically gives us a roadmap. It starts with a new technology, the trigger. Then, boom, the hype goes through the roof to this peak of inflated expectations. And what comes next? A huge crash, right down into the Trough of Disillusionment. That is the winter. And only after you crawl out of that trough can the real, steady progress actually begin. And let me tell you, the history of AI follows this cycle almost perfectly.
So let's take a look at the very first time this whole cycle played out. We're talking about the original dreamers, back in the 50s and 60s.
The first promise, wow, it was breathtaking. The core idea was that human intelligence was basically just symbol manipulation, like logic. Think about it. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. The thinking was, if we could just program all those kinds of logical rules into a machine, we could create a real thinking intelligence.
And you know what? For a little while, it really seemed like it was working. They had programs like the logic theorists that could actually prove mathematical theorems. They built other programs that could solve complex logic puzzles and even play games like checkers. These early wins were so exciting, it made that huge promise feel like it was just right around the corner.
Okay, but here is where the first cracks started to show, and this slide just perfectly lays out that disconnect. The promise, right, was this grand vision of general intelligence. But the reality? These programs only worked in what the researchers called micro-worlds. Think about a chessboard. The rules are perfect, they're absolute, there's no ambiguity. But if you ask that very same program to understand a simple sentence, like "the cat sat on the mat," it would just fall apart. It had zero common sense for the messy, unpredictable real world.
And the breaking point came in 1974. A really critical report came out in the UK called the Lightho Report, and it basically said, hey, where's the real progress here? That report led to massive funding cuts, and just like that, the first AI winter arrived. The optimism just froze solid.
But, after a few years out in the cold, the field found a new path forward. Instead of this huge, ambitious goal of creating a general intelligence, researchers narrowed their focus. And this led to something called the expert systems boom.
This new promise was way more practical. The whole idea was, let's go find a human expert, a doctor, maybe a geologist, and just download their brain. We'll interview them for hours and encode their entire decision-making process into a long series of if-then rules. Something like, if the patient has a fever and a cough, then it's probably the flu.
And this approach, it actually worked in the real world. They built systems like Dendral, which could identify chemical compounds, and MySyn, which could diagnose blood diseases just as well as human doctors. I mean, this sparked a huge commercial boom. Suddenly, AI was back, baby.
But we've seen this movie before, haven't we? The promise was to automate expertise in every industry. But the reality was, getting all that knowledge out of a human's head and into a computer was insanely difficult and expensive. They even had a name for it, the knowledge bottleneck. And just like the first time around, these systems were super brittle. They knew absolutely nothing outside of their one very narrow subject.
So,
The bubble burst. In the late 1980s, the special computers they built to run these systems, they were called Lisp machines, suddenly became obsolete. The market totally collapsed. Companies went bankrupt, and a second, even colder and longer AI winter set in.
Which, of course, brings us to today. We are, without a doubt, in the middle of another massive AI boom, this time fueled by deep learning and all these generative models. And that leads to the one question on everyone's mind. Is this time different?
When you look at the whole journey laid out like this, you can just so clearly see the pattern, right? The peaks and the valleys. 2 major booms, followed by 2 major winters. And right now, we are standing on the highest peak this field has ever seen.
So what is actually different this time? Well, it's the fundamental technology. The old booms were driven by clever logic and rules that humans had to code by hand. Today's boom is driven by 3 things that just didn't exist back then. 1. Massive, unbelievable amounts of data. 2. Incredibly powerful computer chips, like GPUs. And 3. Advanced algorithms that can actually learn from all that data, instead of being told what to do. This really is a totally different game.
But even with this brand new playbook, history has some really important lessons for us. So how do we ride this incredible wave of hype without falling into the exact same traps as before?
Okay, lesson number 1, and this might be the most important one of all,
is we have to temper all this hype with some real honesty. Look, every single past winter was caused by overpromising and underdelivering. By being upfront and transparent about what today's AI can do, and maybe more importantly, what it can't do, we can build real, sustainable trust and avoid that inevitable backlash when the wildest promises don't come true overnight.
and that leads us right into the second big lesson.
We have to learn to value the slow, steady, incremental progress. Real, lasting advancement in science doesn't just come from flashy, revolutionary breakthroughs. It comes from rigorous, step-by-step research. You know, it's often in those quiet periods, the winters, between the hype cycles, where the most important foundational work actually gets done.
Which leaves us with the big, final question, doesn't it? We have the history book right in front of us. We've seen this hype cycle play out not once, but twice. So are we smart enough this time around to manage the expectations, to value that steady progress, and to finally navigate this incredible technological wave without plunging ourselves into another long, cold winter? Honestly, the answer to that is going to define the next chapter for all of us.